Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. I'd like to show you a brilliant game by the American chess genius Paul Morphy. So Morphy shook up the European world of chess in 1858, 1859. He was in Europe for just less than a year. And that time he defeated in matches the three of the leading European players. So that's Loewenthal, as we're going to see a game against Loewenthal here, Daniel Harwitz and Adolf Anderssen. But perhaps, you know, when you think of a brilliant game by Morphy, you think of the Opera House game, where he developed rapidly and then sacked his queen and won very quickly. And, you know, there are lots of games like that. But this is played in a very different style. And, you know, Morphy, well, he plays knight f3 here. You know, there are lots of games where he plays the King's Gambit or the Evans Gambit, these romantic openings. But actually, very often they're against much weaker players, or they're from simultaneous exhibitions. And against stronger players, well, as here, he plays the Spanish here. So a very sensible opening. But still, it's all about rapid development, trying to control the centre and go for the attack. And you know, he developed in the most efficient way possible. You know, those are the hallmarks of his play. So here, castles kingside, of course, is the normal move for white. But here, Morphy played d4. This is well known. It's only dangerous for black if you really don't know what you're doing. But it's very much in the style of Morphy. Pawn takes pawn, e5. So you can see, you know, he's launching forward in the centre very quickly, putting pressure on his opponent. But Loewenthal reacts very well. Knight e4 and then knight c5. This is a good counter. So the bishop is attacked, and either the bishop has to drop back to b3 or take on c6. Basically, black claims the two bishops. So Morphy gets his pawn back, and now good reaction from Loewenthal, knight e6. So yeah, looking to exchange off this strong piece on d4. Morphy exchanges, and now he plays queen e2. You don't want to go for the endgame here. You'll notice a similarity with the Berlin variation of the Spanish. You know, two bishops against bishop and knight. Difference here is that, I mean, this is absolutely fine for black. I would say black is better because of the two bishops. The king can still castle, so there are just no difficulties with development. And it's the fact that this pawn is advanced means that black has good control over the light squares. You know, you can attack this, and it's actually very unpleasant for white. Morphy correctly plays queen e2, and he's looking to advance that f-pawn, using that pawn duo. Bishop c5. I think bishop e7 is perhaps the most prudent, but bishop c5 is fine. It means that the queen does have a square here to go to. Queen e7. Knight e4, good move. You see, no superfluous pawn moves from Morphy at all. Notice here, look. It's all about piece play. Now he threatens bishop g5. So Loewenthal stops that with h6. Now if this is exchanged, then that's no good. Basically, black is going to control these light squares and has no problems at all. So, you know, they're a very easy blockade. But Morphy plays correctly. Bishop e3. You can see, you know, his positional judgment was actually very good. So, exchange of bishops. And this knight could potentially be annoying. And now Morphy is ready to advance with f4. And he's just trying to get things going on the king side, basically. So Loewenthal, I think, plays actually a decent move here. Yeah, casting kingside risky because of f4. Casting queenside, well, that would allow queen a7. You don't want to give white that opportunity. So bishop f5, very interesting move. So it means if f4, then this can be exchanged and castles queenside. And actually the rook stands very well on the open file. These pawns aren't a problem because black gets excellent counterplay with this move and then rook here. And this is a really interesting moment in the game where, again, we see that Morphy loves to play with the initiative. And he has a very clear strategic goal as well. It's funny that his play sometimes reminds me of Fischer's, actually. And Fischer was a great admirer of Paul Morphy. So attacks the bishop, which takes the pawn, and then f4. So absolutely clear strategic plan. Advance E and F pawns, and that is very dangerous. Castling here would not be great. G6. In fact, there's a game of Fischer against Unziker, where Fischer also advanced the F and E pawns from a Spanish exchange variation, which is actually rather... There are some similarities with this. Now, what should white play? He didn't go f5. He played e6. Really interesting move. So there's a little tactic. So if pawn takes pawn, queen c3 hits rook and bishop. And this, yeah, there's potentially very dangerous if black castles kingside. So bishop f5, and that blocks the f-pawn, prevents the f-pawn from advancing. So it's actually a good move. The Loewenthal defends pretty well. Morphy exchanges, and then exchanges pawns here. This is the best he has. And then, of course, avoids an exchange of queens because black is a pawn up. But Morphy does have some compensation here. King's a little bit exposed. These pawns are isolated. And basically, white's king is better than black's king. And there's just a slight advantage in development. You can see that, white is the first to get the rook into play. And after rook e8, excellent move, taking the initiative, rook e5. So if the rooks are exchanged, then of course that is winning. The f-file opens. So Morphy has the initiative. He's attacking that pawn, which is defended by the king. And the second rook follows up. Rook takes rook. Now in this case, excuse me, pawn takes pawn will be met by queen e6, and that's a secure blockade. But rook e5 just maintains the pressure. Loewenthal brings the queen's rook into play, so now there's a bit of counterplay. And this is this next couple of moves. It's not spectacular, but actually it's very, very important. Just have a think. I'll have a quick slurp of tea. I think I need it. You have a think. How do you play as white here? What did Morphy do next? But this is really important. Well, he just improved the position of his king. He played queen g3. Black king goes back. And h3. Very simple, but absolutely necessary. Just means the king is totally safe on h2, compared with black's king, which would, if we could take one of those queenside pawns and put it on g7, then black would be very happy. But this is still very tricky. And for the moment, black just has to wait. Rook d7, queen e3 takes control of the open file. So that rook always has the possibility to invade. b6. and this is a very nice moment. Just king h2. Let your opponent sweat. Black cannot undertake anything active in this position. So just let them sweat and see what happens. You know, we've seen players like Karpov and, well, in our age, Carlsen do this on so many occasions. Objectively, Black is still okay here. Black is still holding. But it's so unpleasant to wait. And as we've seen so often, very often the defender cracks. c5. Queen e2, an interesting move. Hitting that pawn, but perhaps feinting at playing queen c2 and exploiting that pin. Maybe. But keeping all options open. And Loewenthal decides to defend, well, in a, you could say, reasonably active way. So perhaps he was thinking, if queen takes pawn, then he gets counterplay on the g-file. Queen defends, but now queen g3 and rook d7. No, this is unpleasant. I mean, white is still okay here. For example, after this, in fact, threatening rook e1, the game is going to liquidate to a draw. That's okay, it's a draw and endgame. But interesting that Morphy recognises that black would get counterplay and instead plays rook e6. Very good move. So pushing the queen back, and now this is actually very unpleasant. And here comes a really beautiful moment in the game. Queen h5. Attacks the pawn, increases the pressure. Rook d5. Okay, over to you again. This is wonderful. Doesn't look like a spectacular position, but you know, I rate this kind of game and this kind of idea higher than, you know, the opera house brilliancy. It's all a question of taste, but how would you play here with white? This is great. This is really good. Okay, are you ready? White to play. b3. Yes, what a stunner. After this move, black is in Zugzwang. It's just fantastic to be able to recognize that situation. Not when it's pointed out to you, as I'm doing here, but in the heat of battle, in the middle of a game, to recognize that actually in this position, black has no decent move. So, for example, well, what happens in the game? Black played b5, but let's just see what happens if a5. Okay, let's just block that one, and black still has the same problem. So, if this rook moves back, queen takes pawn. That's decisive. If, let me see, if queen g8, if the queen moves, then queen takes pawn mate. What else have we got? Queen f8, check, and rook e8. Okay, what about c4? Give the rook some room. Well, now the queen invades, and now the rook is offside, and no decent defense to here. I mean, this is just wonderful. Oh, incidentally, there's a nice little trick. So basically, you know, black is just lost here. After a5, so I was playing a4, which puts black in Zugzwang. But if queen e8, which looks like it should be winning, then watch what happens. A little trick here. Rook d2. And black's counterplay pulls through just in time. Rook e7. Now it's a draw by perpetual check. But anyway, back to the game. b3 played. But yeah, that we've just been looking at a5, a4. Black has no decent move. So Loewenthal played b5 and allowed rook takes pawn on a6. But actually, black hasn't really freed himself here. And it's just lost now. Even though material is even, there's enough pressure for white here. And black really has absolutely no defense here. Loewenthal played rook d6. I mean, I should say that c4, I mean, I think white would probably just collect that pawn. Doesn't help matters at all. But rook d6 played, queen f5, so that's a crucial pawn to take because it means that all these endgames are winning for white when you have two extra pawns, basically two connected pawns on one side of the board, in the king side in this case. But good technique from Morphy. And that's the other thing, looking through his games, generally his technique was very good actually in endgames. So let's just see how this finished. f5, yeah, and basically you just have to get these pawns marching and forget about the other side of the board. c4, king f5, c3, but now the rook just comes back to pick up that pawn here. Loewenthal resigned. If c2, then of course you can just play here, and then these pawns decide. Now, if you were shown that game, not knowing who the players were and when it was played, would you have said that it was from the mid-19th century? I think that's a fantastic game. I have to say I've been really enjoying playing through a lot of Morphy's games. I know a lot of the famous games, but I've never looked at his games in great detail, and it's been great. I'm so glad I've done that. So I'm going to show you another Morphy game in another video that also really impressed me. But just come back to this position. Wow. b3, Zugzwang. He was on a different level to a lot of the players at that time. Thanks for watching.